from a language standpoint, validating the other person's matrix. And you can do that so simply as you repeat their belief or repeat their value and then just add a statement of validation. That seems important to you. I bet that's hard for you. And whatever they say, that just really pisses them out. So you must really be angry about that when you think about it, this value being vital. And that just creates such rapport, and it really gives us entrance into their matrix. And so we're going to be using that as we move into what we're going to do today. On page 66, Mastering Our Relationship Matrix, the description today is discovering our others matrix and the skills that enable us to create rapport and trust and respect and to listen and communicate effectively and influence and negotiate and build teams. It's just all those things. The challenge is with other people is when there's frustrations or disappointments or criticisms. And so what we want to do is to deal with that. The solution is to detect and empower and transform and reframe and maybe reload our matrix about others to develop the skills and the patterns to work effectively with and through others. Not only were we born in a matrix of others, and that was some of the first influence, but if we're going to be effective in life, we have to work with others and oftentimes through others. So creating good relationships is just such a mastery skill. As a description of the others matrix on page 67, here's a whole set of questions that can help you to identify and detect some of your matrix. What do you think and feel about people? Who are people? What is it like relating to people? What is the nature of relationships? What skills do I have for getting along, creating rapport, and understanding? What meanings have I constructed about those I like and connect with? About those we invest in and bond with? About those we dislike and avoid? Who do you play your life before? What do you think about human nature? So these are questions that have to do with that others matrix. And once again, oftentimes the default frames, the default matrix, is a result of just having been around some people who didn't graduate from Parenting 101 or who were just hurtful in some way. And we built maps about people and about how to get along. So your frames about people. This matrix reflects our views and concepts about relating to people. Here we map our ideas about relationships, love, associations, authority, roles, teams, races, cultures, arguments, conflicts, forgiveness, and all other kinds of relational and social emotions. And under the little section there, social and relational skills, you can see all these social emotions from love, support, affection, friendship, affiliation, connection, involvement, being included, trust, trustworthiness, betrayal. And so this is the others matrix that we have grown up in, and of course it just influences so many facets of everyday life. As we begin, I want to make another distinction from developmental psychology, and this will be, I'm sure, just well known to you, and to sort out four words that we'll play with off and on throughout the day. Of course, the first word is dependency. We're born dependent. Totally and absolutely dependent. On everything. On all the needs, from the most basic life needs all the way up. And it takes a long time before we move to a place of independence. Independence takes, how long? 20 years, 40 years to become really independent. And the strategy for independence, the place to move to where I feel autonomous and individualized. I'm a somebody with my mind, with my emotion, my opinion, my feelings, my speech, my behavior. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I can take care of my own self to be independent. The next one is interdependence. So with interdependence, now I'm relating to somebody who, if they're independent, then we have two autonomous persons, two healthy, well-developed persons interrelating, and as they interrelate, they create a shared world of interdependence. And most of us know and recognize that the structure of good interdependence, it takes two strong independent persons to be truly interdependent. If we go from dependency into relationship, if we go from there, we tend to get merged together to where we have a codependency. So here's four words: dependent, independent, interdependent, codependent. And our definition of these terms goes from one kind of dependency to actually another kind of dependency. But it has a very different feel and very different strategy, interdependence, because once again we're depending, but we're depending really out of our strengths, out of our wholeness, not out of our neediness. That's what makes codependency unhealthy, because it's coming out of neediness. I need you to finish the stuff I haven't finished. Maybe I need you to be needy so I can feel good taking care. And love is then taking care of, rescuing, fixing. Of course, the danger is if the person gets fixed, then they don't need that smotherly. So codependency is very unhealthy. So the paradox, it takes a lot of independence, a lot of a sense of me, so that we can create a new sense of we, that shared reality. So as we talk about relationships today, as we talk about dealing with others, as we talk about different kinds of relationships, we'll be playing with these words again and again. And we could talk about the strategy of how to become independent. And of course, the danger for some of us married so young that we really weren't independent enough to know how to negotiate that kind of a thing of two healthily independent persons to create that new sense. So as we talk about relationships today, we're going to be doing that. And the first exercise I want us to do in a little bit is drawing the line of responsibility for versus responsibility to. Because when we have that clear, it seems to me our matrix in relating to others, whoever that other is, whether it's a lover, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's colleagues, whether it's associates, whether it's just acquaintances, whether it's business associates, whatever that relationship is, we can now define that relationship and what I'm giving to them and what they're giving to me. And we can be independent enough and clear enough and kind enough and getting enough rapport that we can say, here's what I want. And feel that I have the right to say, I want something. And here's some things I don't want. And can we work that through? But before we do that, I'd like to send us back to our groups so that you can identify what you want to get out of today. Hopefully you have a sense of where we're going to go and some of the things we're going to talk about. There's a set of objectives on page 66 as far as some of the things we'll be talking about today: uninsultability, responsibility to, for, some of those things, giving and receiving feedback. Because once again, as you become real intentional, what do you want? So if you'll take a moment, write down 3 things you want to get out of today. When you get to your groups, just go around sharing one thing that you want out of today, and then go around the second time. One more thing you want out of today, and one more thing. And this will be for brainstorming and for identifying, as well as for saying out loud to somebody and saying it to them so they look at you when you say, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to get out of this. So we'll take, let's take 15 minutes, and we'll be back here in 15 minutes. Where I'd like to begin is to do a piece that will build up for uninsultability. It'll build up for also good, solid relationships, and it's a piece that comes out of what we did the other day on the power zone. So, as a diagram of what I want to talk about, we're going to separate responsibility to and responsibility for. This is page 68. I've mentioned it before, Now we want to spend some time just really going into it in some detail. If I have these response powers of mind and emotion, speech and behavior, then my thinking and my feeling, someone else's thinking and their feeling, our thoughts and our feelings are our private powers that create our state, create our matrix. And what we actually give to each other are not our thoughts and feelings, but how we express our thoughts and feelings, our speech and behavior. So this enables us to make a real distinction between accountability, being accountable for what I say, what I do, what I think, what I feel, being accountable, and relationship. And so the distinction between responsibility 2-4, to draw that line between responsibility 2-4, what am I responsible for, who am I responsible to, is the difference between accountability and relationship. Two very different phenomena. In terms of accountability, this is accountability to recognize what I can do and the powers of response I can make, and what I'm accountable for, what I've said and what I've done. And relationship now can be analyzed and can even be detailed out in terms of how do you want me to speak to you? What would be some of the behaviors that you'd want me to give to you? So the speech and the behavior, as I give that to you, becomes the contract, the arrangement, the agreement. How do I want you to speak to me? And we identify that. We can then detail out the details of the relationship. And then we can hold each other accountable for, you said you wouldn't yell at me. Can I hold you accountable that you won't do that? When you do that, can I do a timeout and say, just take a deep breath and lower your tone, then I'll be responsible for listening more carefully, so that we can detail out the actual behaviors and the actual speech and all the things that are sensory-based and empirical at this level, as they come from, of course, all of our internal, our private powers, thoughts and feelings. So it's, in one sense, a very, very simple distinction, and yet, at another level, it is so crucial for really keeping sane. Without this distinction, then I'll feel responsible for what you think, what you feel. And you might even say so. You might say, you make me feel, or you make me experience this or that. And drawing this line enables us to recognize that we don't, even if someone says we do. Their emotions are their emotions, their thoughts are their thoughts. And if I'm free to really respect and honor, you have the right to feel anything you want to feel. And I can care about you, and I can renegotiate that relationship. So if I find a button that pushes a button, tone of voice or rolling eyes or some behavior, not being present, showing up late, and you say, I read that, I feel, I interpret that as meaning this and that, would you be so kind as to not do that or do something else? Then we can negotiate the relationship, whether it's personal, business, with colleagues, with family. And so the distinction between responsibility 2 and 4. Comments, questions?
Just in one sentence, because I think I got lost with accountability and the relationship.
Well, that's what it is. Accountability, accountable for my powers. I'm not accountable for how you think. I'm not accountable for what you do, or what you say, or what you feel. I can be responsible to you about that if we're in relationship. So 2 is relationship, 4 is accountability.
Would that be, if we're accountable like for somebody else, is that like a meshment? People get enmeshed?
So as we go back, and this is where the previous page is significant now, a parent being independent, taking care of a dependent child, will have a different kind of a relationship, because responsibility 2-4 is presupposing 2 independent persons. So as a parent, I take care of and I'm responsible for my child. But it's a legal responsibility more than it is. I can't be responsible for what that child is thinking or feeling. I try to control, when the child is small, around 2, maybe I can control what it does. And I try to say rules about, you don't talk this way in this house. But actually, in terms of response powers, even that child is accountable for how the child talks and behaves. And so it's a legal responsibility, not an actual response. So as we make that distinction between legal and actual responsibilities. So if I enter into a relationship with you and I'm going to be your employer, legally I'm responsible for insurance or payment or this or that, or if you do something, I may be held accountable. I have a 20-year-old daughter still at home, Jessica, and so I'm legally responsible if she goes and wrecks the car today. Legally, I'm responsible for what she does around that. And so legal responsibility is different. I'm actually not responsible for how she drives a car. Even when she was learning at 16, I would say all kinds of things to her. But it was her response, her power to make that response. And so the ability to manage a dependent relationship, when someone is dependent upon you, once again, we can define the dependency in terms of a relationship. So this gives us the ability to start sorting this. In French, if you know French, this is very confusing in French because there's no word for and to that separates this. I feel responsible of you. I feel responsible of myself. And so the preposition of is the only French word. And so in time I've done this in Geneva or in Paris or somewhere in France, this is a very difficult concept. And so what I've learned to do is to use the gestures. My responses are my responses, and I'm accountable for them. And your responses are your responses, and you're responsible for them, accountable for them. I can be responsible to you for what I give and say, and you can give and say. And so we have to actually introduce those prepositions because it's not in the language. It's just incredible. I'll spend a whole hour saying the same thing over and over and over again because it's just such a difficult concept. But we've got the prepositions for and to. And that enables us to more clearly distinguish accountability versus responsibility. So if you want to do a little exercise, take your finger and put it on your nose, because that's where your accountability, responsibility ends. Now, most of us, at the feeling level, still feel responsible for things out there. And if you're overly conscientious, you can extend your responsible circle way out there. So what we want to do is to bring it in so that your responsibility circle is right there. And when you bring it in to make it, I don't know about you, but for me, it's a full-time job being responsible for what I'm thinking. I don't know about you, but just being responsible for all my emotions and all my speech and all my behavior. Talk about full-time job. I don't have time to take responsibility for what you're thinking or feeling or saying or doing.
That's unless we come see you and offer you a fee.
And so now it gets convoluted. It gets tricky because if we don't make the responsibility, I remember as a counselor turning and tossing at 2 and 3 in the morning, worrying about other people's problems, until I finally realized I'm doing more mental and emotional work than they are. And it's not even my problem. And so pulling that in, and it may feel unkind. It may feel actually mean when you first say, I'm not responsible for what you think and feel. And yet really it's one of the sanest things you can do because it really frees them up. Because actually when I think I'm going to be responsible for what you think and do, then I get my little greedy hands in, I'm aggressing into your area. I'm actually being very disrespectful because I think that you're a fragile little person and you can't take care of yourself. And when I pull it back and honor the fact that you have the right to think and feel any kind of sense or nonsense that you want.
So, say for example, you're an employer and you have people working for you,
Uh-huh.
and you feel like they're not doing the job right.
Uh-huh.
But you know that if you explain to them, you go through all these iterations of how you're going to say it, but you know they're going to be hurt probably by what you say.
Okay.
How does that fit?
Do you have permission to let them be hurt?
Permission to let them be hurt.
Because that's the next thing. Do I have permission to let them take any kind of hurt they want to take?
But it would be coming from me, so wouldn't I be responsible for that?
Well, once you do the best you can, otherwise we tiptoe around on tiptoes, on eggshells, just second-guessing everybody's feelings and thinking, and that's no way to live. I mean, so taking responsibility and giving up responsibility for them. If they want to say, don't talk to me in that way, then we can, okay, let's renegotiate. How do you want me to give you feedback? Tell me. How do you want me to give feedback? When you do something wrong, how do you want me to give it to you? I don't want you to give me anything wrong that I'm doing wrong. All right, you're fired.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If their frame is such that they can't take anything,
Uh-huh.
they always have to do a good job, they always want praise, then how do you do that, in a good way?
Well, you do the best you can. You can do some pre-framing. I don't mean to hurt your feelings. This is not about you personally. It's not about you as a person. It's about your behavior. Now, the next step we're going to do is we're going to do feedback here in a little bit. How do we give feedback? How do we take feedback? And how do we give feedback? Because there's a way of giving feedback that I think you can say almost anything to anybody and get by with it. And we'll get to that in a little bit.
So the message that I get is I am responsible for myself, and I can hold myself accountable to me, but I'm only accountable to you. I'm not responsible for you.
Yeah. We have relationship. We
We
relate
have
to
a relationship.
interaction.
You can choose to hold me accountable,
Yeah.
but if I become responsible for you, then I am becoming, or you are becoming codependent to me, or vice versa.
So closer and closer relationships, we give people permission to hold us accountable. Who have you given permission for somebody to hold you accountable for what you're giving to them in terms of speech and behavior? Because that defines relationship. And if you won't let anybody hold you accountable, well, that's a whole matrix in and of itself, a whole set of frames and beliefs. But good relationships are built upon, I give you permission to hold me accountable for what I say or do in this area or that area, because I'm willing to be accountable. And people who won't be accountable, they're not ready for a relationship. They're not ready for... First of all, they need to have enough independence, or they may not be ready for a job. If you hire people who need therapy, who can't even receive correction and instruction and information, then they're trying to do a different kind of relationship in that context. So one of the things in any kind of management is choosing people who have the ego strength to receive feedback.
When we hire managers in our little small chain of restaurants, we always make sure that we cover that up front. Is how and we ask them, how do they take feedback? How do they deal with it? And we remind them that okay, we understand that's how you do that, and we will be coming to you to give you feedback. So we're going to expect this kind of response.
So you set up that relationship. Our relationship is, I'm going to give you feedback. Are you okay with that? And when we do our performance reviews, when we look at that, we're going to hold you accountable for the things you're doing. You willing to be accountable? And so responsibility 4 and 2, drawing that line. So if we're going to draw this line on page 68, there's some descriptions there at the very top about this. Then if you want to really set this as one of the frames, one of the pieces inside your matrix about other people, and give yourself really the freedom and the liberation from feeling responsible for other people, then the first step is just accessing your power zone, accessing it fully, taking ownership for it, and then making that distinction. And then step 3 is just coming up with some ways of expressing this that will be compelling for you. I put mine down. These are just mine. You can steal them if you want to. You can adjust them and change them. But here's the things I say to myself that help me to draw this line. If it doesn't come out of my mind, my mouth, my heart, my body, it's not mine. So if someone says, they don't like something I did, or they think I was really selfish or egotistical, or they say I was a son of a bitch, I can just feel really comfortable. I didn't say that. I didn't think that. I didn't feel that. That's not mine. And so like any gift, I can say, oh, no, thank you.
But isn't your communication what's received, not what you put out?
I'd say more.
In other words, they may have thought that you said something when you believed that you didn't, but isn't the communication that you actually had is what they received, not what you said?
Well, sure, the communing of the two. But how I feel about it, whatever comes at me is not mine. Now I can start asking questions. Well, in what way am I a son of a bitch? In what way do you see me egotistical? What did I do or say that you interpreted it that way? Help me to understand. Because until I start exploring it, but if I can't explore it, if I feel responsible, so it frees me so that I can communicate, and communicate really from a good state. I will not insult others by treating them as fragile, weak, unable to claim their personality powers. I have a full-time job being responsible for myself. I refuse to act in a codependent way by thinking that I need to rescue others. I will only invite others to contract with me for assistance. I refuse to be seduced in fixing them or cramming something down their throats. I don't have to, and I don't need to rescue anyone. Others have the right to choose to be as unsane as they want to be, especially family members. So that helps me. As you find your words, that helps you to draw that. Who has a problem drawing that line? Who has a problem drawing that line? Okay. Who would like to work with me up here, and we'll just walk through this little process? Bruce? So, first of all, as always, when I want to work with somebody, I always want to know, let's find some reference experience where it's tough to do that.
Okay.
So you got something in mind? Somewhere where it's hard to draw that line.
Okay, like talking to my sister.
Okay. So the tendency is to feel responsible for how she's feeling and thinking?
Yes.
Okay. So let's get into your power zone.
Okay.
Power up.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay. So the other day you accessed your powers of thought and feeling, speech, and behavior. So just kind of go there and imagine your bubble, your energy bubble, that circle, that sphere of excellence of your powers. And the other day you used your powers, you're thinking to think of something that every fiber of your being could say, mine,
Right.
and take ownership. So think about that, and let me hear your mind.
Okay. In the same context?
Well, think of something that every fiber of your being can say, mine.
Okay.
So something small, simple.
Okay. This car is mine.
Okay, it's not the bank's.
Right.
It's absolutely yours.
Not yet. Right now it's mine.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe think small or simple.
Okay. Okay, the way I decorate my bedroom, it's mine.
Okay. So that's every fiber of your being knows that.
Yes.
Okay. So the sense of I own that realization, that awareness, that activity.
Yes.
Okay. So say mine and gesture mine in such a way that you really convey that sense of ownership.
Okay. The way that my house looks or the way it's decorated is mine.
Okay. Mine.
Mine.
Okay. So do that a couple more times.
Okay.
Mine.
It's definitely mine.
Mine. Okay. So how much do you feel that? It's mine.
About 8.
Okay. So without saying the words out loud, just say mine, or however you do it.
Okay.
Okay, mine. Make that twice as strong.
All right. Okay, it's mine.
Mine. Every fiber of my being knows that.
Yes.
Mine. So feeling that, I want you to feel that. Do that again.
Okay.
my thoughts,
My thoughts.
my emotions,
My emotion.
my speech,
My speech.
my behaviors, my life, my matrix, my right to be who I am.
Okay. That's mine.
Okay. So as you fill that up, mine, we're going to add a word now. My responsibility for me.
Okay. My responsibility for me. It's mine.
Mine. It ends at the end of this sphere.
Okay.
So the sphere gives you that boundary, creates that boundary, that responsibility for in here.
Okay.
And then, as you imagine that sphere, so it goes, maybe a little past your nose, all right? But just, right here, responsible for what you say, what you do. Now imagine your sister
Okay.
and being responsible to her for whatever relationship you have.
Mm-hmm.
And just imagine she's responsible for her thoughts, her feelings. Those are hers.
Okay.
She has the right for those.
It's hard to do. 'Cause
Okay.
I feel like there's a blending. There's an interweaving there.
Okay.
It's hard to just end those boundaries.
Okay. Do you have permission to have a boundary?
Actually, I don't think so.
Okay. So let's
I'll
test.
tell you why.
I don't care why.
Okay. All right.
Go inside and just say the words. I give myself to have permission to have a boundary, so that I have the right to my life. She has the right to hers. I give myself permission to have this boundary.
Okay.
So whatever blending, the blending is by choice and by agreement.
Okay.
But how does that settle?
It doesn't.
Okay. And so what's the objection? What's the complaint?
Well, the objection is that in a relationship where there's a love between each other, I feel like there is a responsibility for what I say so it doesn't hurt that person.
Okay. You can be responsible for what you say to her, so you can be responsible for your words.
Okay.
Do you know the words she wants you to give you?
No, that's the problem.
Okay. Well, that's the agreement. And so the first thing is just getting really solid. I have the right to say any word, and then I can make an agreement if she doesn't want to hear certain words. She doesn't want to, bring up certain subjects.
Okay.
And you can open up your ego boundaries to let her in where there's a good connection, and you can close the boundaries where you don't have a relationship there, you don't have a connection there.
Right.
And you can open up your boundaries, close your boundaries, but you have boundaries.
Uh-huh.
So
That makes the relationship only how's the weather.
okay.
Okay.
The relationship you've had with her, has it been a dependent relationship? She depends upon you for therapy, for fathering, for...
Not at all. No.
Okay, so what do you feel responsible for in her life?
Well, her life is very complicated. I know that. Having medical issues, I know that. So it's almost like I feel like I have to tread easy, because I don't want to hurt her.
So is she fragile?
Yes.
Okay. So what kind of words do you want to give to her above and beyond the weather?
Well, how you doing and how you feeling and, how
Okay.
things are better and...
Okay. Is it mutual? Can she give that back to you?
No.
Okay. Is that okay with you to have that kind of relationship?
No, that's why I don't call her.
Okay. Okay. And when you don't call her, you feel guilty?
Yes.
Okay. So let's own your powers,
Okay.
because it's your choice. To me, it makes no difference what you do or don't do, whatever your agreement is.
Okay.
But what would you want to give to her?
I'd like there to be open communication.
Is that realistic?
I would think that it would be.
Knowing her, is it?
No.
Okay.
That's what I would like, though.
Yeah.
I'd like skills to be able to do that.
Okay. Well, you can keep that liking.
Okay.
So you can keep that desire, that hope, that wish, that desire, and maybe even come up with some things you could give to her, maybe to facilitate it.
Okay.
But wanting it, wishing for it, hoping for it is different from assuming that's the way it is.
Right.
So making that distinction, what you hope for, what you wish it to become and move toward versus what it is now.
Okay.
What is it now? If you were to define the behaviors and the language that you give to her and what she can give back to you, if you were to define it like an agreement or a contract, what do you give to her?
It's almost like we're trying to find rapport with each other, and we're probing and trying without hurting each other. Because then, I become fragile too with her communication back to me. It's my older sister,
Okay.
So it's like this dance that kind of sucks.
Okay. So let's once again talk about the permission to have a boundary.
Okay.
When she says something to you that somehow you take hurt and it's this dance that sucks, and somehow you become fragile, somehow, don't say this out loud, but just notice what she gives to you that gets in and gets you.
Okay.
Because what we want to do is put up a boundary so that you can at least stay resourceful,
Okay.
even when she's sending those barbs.
Right.
So if you go in and say, I give myself permission to have boundaries, to have the right to open the boundaries up to who I will, and to close the boundaries so I don't let certain things in, I have the right to protect myself.
Right.
In fact, I'm responsible. I'm responsible for protecting myself. And as I have better skills, more competencies, I can give to her things that I hope will make a difference.
I could do that.
Okay, so how does that feel?
That feels good.
Okay. So just imagine that energy field and that boundary. And then when you see her, notice that you can open it and give her some things. And when something painful comes, you can just close it. If it doesn't fit, if it's not really useful feedback, if it's just barbs and criticism.
Right. I could do that.
Okay, so how does that feel?
That feels good.
So if you try on the words, I'm responsible for me, for my beliefs, my values, my emotions, my responses. I'm responsible for what I give her.
Okay.
And I'm willing to be responsible to her in certain areas, certain ways. How does that feel?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So let's future pace this into the future. There'll be a time when you'll meet her. And you can, click up that energy field, have that sense of boundary. Keeping your hope that, eventually she can maybe come to a place it can be a mutual exchange and the love that you have for each other can somehow be expressed more effectively. But if that's not where it is today, then that's a goal to move toward, not the expectation for today. If you were to make a list of what can you expect of her today, when you meet her, what can you expect? What's in character?
Lots of arrows.
That's in character. So you can expect that. Okay, and you got the resource now to protect yourself from that. What else can you expect?
The dance of trying to establish rapport.
Okay, and when you say
on
the
both
dance
sides.
of trying, what would that look like if I saw that? Or what would
Okay.
it sound like?
Well, the way that she views the world, and this is what I learned over the past couple of days, and this is how I'm able to have that power in me, because I see that it's not something I should take personally, because it's just her frame of mind. It's, where she's coming from, her fears and everything. So through her fears, she's going to try and reach out to me in ways that, really are not me or
So she's going to be telling you that you're something that doesn't fit for you.
or acting in a way expecting me to be a way that she expects me to be when I'm not that way at all.
Okay, so what does she expect?
What does she expect?
What does she expect of you to be in the way that...
Okay. That I'm the little brother and I don't know what I'm doing and I need her help.
You need her
that's
help.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
So you can
that's
expect
one that
these
used to
things.
push my buttons.
So you can expect these things, and they used to push your buttons.
Yes.
And do you have now the resource just to let that be hers?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so how does all that settle?
That feels good.
Okay. Okay, so we have started the process of responsible for and responsible to.
Yes. And I could actually call her now, and I'm looking forward to that when I get back.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Give him a... So what I'd like everybody to do is to try on this pattern. It's very, very simple, but it can be emotionally challenging sometimes. We have ego boundaries. An ego boundary is our sense of self, and And an ego boundary is part of how we explain how we connect with people. Because when you meet someone that you care about, you love, you get to know, you open up your ego boundaries, you let them in. They become part of your matrix of others. They become part of your internal world. They're part of your audience. They're connected. When someone's real painful, we tend to open up the ego boundaries and push them out. Now, the technical word for that is cathecting and decathecting. It's a psychoanalytic word. We cathect with them. We connect with them. We open up our ego boundaries. And you can do this with inanimate objects. You can cathect with your computer and love your computer until it crashes. And then you decathect with it. Or with an animal. So we cathect, that is, we open up our ego boundaries and bring things in. But sometimes some people have ego boundaries that are wide open. There's no sense of protection. So closing those ego boundaries and feeling the right to close those ego boundaries, because what's out there is toxic to you. It doesn't fit your values, your beliefs, your visions, your sense of self. And so it's keeping it out there. And this will be an intimate, we're going to come back and revisit this when we do uninsultability, because this is at the core of uninsultability. If you can't do that, if you can't close your ego boundaries, then you're just open for attack, and you'll personalize everything. You'll take insult where insult wasn't even offered. You'll be offended and violated constantly because of the lack of ego boundaries. So the ego boundaries, and you may want to imagine it as, you could have a plexiglass, you could have an energy field, you could have doors. Now some people put up walls. There's no ego boundaries, there's ego walls. They're fortresses. You can't ever get into them because they're not going to open up their heart to anybody. So we don't want walls, we want just boundaries, flexible boundaries, and boundaries that from the inside you can open up and you can close. And so that's what we're doing. Actually, every time you say, I'm responsible for myself and to others, that's creating a boundary. Because I'm not responsible for them, I'm responsible to them if we have a relationship, and we can start specifying. Any questions on how to do the process? This is where, when you're coaching, when you're the one leading the person, facilitating it, you could easily get caught up in content. And that's why when Bruce said, you don't want to know why, no, I don't want to know why. I don't need the details. In fact, I actually got more content than I intended to. Because I don't need to know the details. The person can just be with those details in their own mind. Because the process, the structure is responsible for, responsible to. Well, let's do 12 minutes each and see how that settles. How did responsibility 4-2 go?
Actually, good.
Okay. Okay. Any great insights or epiphanies or questions or comments? Let's get Brian.
The thought of the ego boundary and all that, and I think it's interesting that sometimes that boundary seems pretty strong, but sometimes it can be weak. In other words, for instance, if I've just made a couple of mistakes, or if I've lost a business contract, or whatever, and all of a sudden I can feel a little more vulnerable, that boundary might not be as strong as it would otherwise be, and then so I'm maybe more susceptible to personalizing a negative comment or personalizing something negative going on. So just kind of being aware of that state and making sure that I'm defining myself really on who I am and not my circumstances at the moment.
Okay.
But just knowing that I won't perfectly do that, and just to be aware that when the boundary might be a little weak and I might be a little bit more vulnerable. And just saying, no, wait a minute, my identity is different and does not equal your accusation. It does not equal your criticism.
So everything Brian's saying about self now takes us back, and why the self matrix is just so important, having a good, solid sense of self. That the world doesn't define us, we get to define and declare our value, our worth, our importance. And then the ego boundary, but when we're stressed, and when there's frustrations and negative emotions, the ego boundaries can be very vulnerable in that sense.
To me, is that number one, it seems that the boundaries are very difficult with those that are loved ones, that are near and dear to your heart, and that I was not honoring my son and his adult maleness by allowing him to have the money relationship with me that he has. And now I need to honor him by saying no.
Okay.
Not only no, start paying back.
Yeah, those adult children. So the ego boundaries, because we let our loved ones in, a lot of times that's where we can get sideswiped, because we let them in and then the barb comes. Where's my ego boundary?
In setting up the boundaries, where the explorer, the person I was working with, was trying to set the power zone and be congruent in that situation and amplify it, I found there was a frame that was inhibiting that condition. By making this individual aware of the frame that was inhibiting her, the whole thing collapsed and became much more congruent, almost to the body was flushing. It was really awesome to see how powerful the matrix is if you get to a frame that is a negative frame, an inhibited frame.
Okay. And what was the inhibiting frame?
Cannot forgive oneself sometimes.
Okay. Okay.
I can't do it. I got to punish them.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Other insights or awarenesses?
Yeah. I was working with Scott, as you see, he likes texting and buttons and things. So I gave him his remote control.
You gave him his remote control.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you saw his remote control in charge of his protective shield, and you allowed the other person to have theirs.
Okay.
Around them.
So how did that metaphor work? The remote control metaphor?
It was more the metaphor, just like having your own sort of energy field around you.
Well, I made him captain of the starship.
Captain of the
Engage force field with his remote control. So their remote control. They don't get the remote control.
Okay. It's always interesting to me what metaphors play and what works and what doesn't work in terms
So
of...
the aliens are out there, you know, with their missiles and weapons of mass destruction and their
another
laser beams and etc. And he just engage force field.
Okay. There was somebody... Doug?
Yeah, well, when we were working with mine, I found almost a reverse thing. I have got a friend who's bipolar and has caused me so much grief that I had established a boundary. It was plexiglass, about this thick. And if she started to go into anything that might be hurtful, I had a rote command ways I'd shut her off and shut her off and shut her off. And I had pretty much shut her out of my life. And I realized when we ran through this process that if I could make that a little more fluid and loosen it up and intelligently listen to as we role-played a little bit of what she could do, I could actually listen to her, and I could keep part of that out, and we could still, I could change the frame, and we can talk about the old times, so I could rehabilitate a perfectly good redhead. I mean...
Rehabilitate a perfectly good redhead.
Yeah. That surprised me when I, because I had just built this solid rope thing that sort of worked.
Okay. Okay, Harrison?
I realized that I have this friend who sort of operates at a different speed than I do. So when he wants to hang out, for him we can spend 7 hours just doing nothing and just hanging out, and it's cool, and we're friends, and it's good. But then maybe after 2 hours I start to get antsy and I want to go take care of something. I want to, do something that's supporting my business or my income or whatever. And when I start to, I usually have trouble communicating that to him in a non-offensive way, something that he doesn't take personally. So then it becomes about, well, you don't want to hang out with me? Are we not friends anymore? And it goes to a different level that's not even real. So I realized that, I have to be able to anticipate those situations and know what's going to happen and that and make it clear that it's not personal, but that I have other things to do. And it was very empowering.
Okay. Marge?
Well, I was thinking that how helpful this is to deal with people. There are people in my life, and I don't know about others, who I want to relate to on certain levels, but they're not necessarily intimate friends.
Okay.
And to be very clear in my mind about What's mine is mine, and their thoughts and feelings and behaviors are theirs.
Okay.
And it goes. Actually, I am aware that everything has been building, and that some of the things we did, 3 days ago or something, are very helpful.
Okay. Well, this is the first piece of what we're doing today, that responsibility 2-4. A few days ago we did the response power zone, and now this. The next one is going to be something we're just going to add to this in our relationships with each other and the way we build relationships, and that is the whole subject of feedback. So the next 2 pages in your manuals is about giving and receiving feedback, because when we give feedback and receive feedback, what we're receiving is speech and behavior. How someone is talking to us, their tone, their tempo, what they're saying, and their actions, their gestures, their lack of actions, whatever. So giving and receiving of feedback. But before we can even talk about this, we have to define what is feedback and what do we mean by this term feedback. So what is feedback? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about it. I'm going to make a couple of statements about what it's not. Feedback is not judgment. Judgment is judgment. Evaluation is evaluation. And feedback is not evaluation or judgment. So if I say, I like your sweater that you're wearing this morning, I like your shirt, you look really good, that's not feedback. That's an evaluation. I'm not feeding back anything to you. I'm telling you what I think and feel. If I say, you shouldn't have done that. What's wrong with you? You messed up again. That's not feedback. That's judgment. So feedback is something very, very different from judgment and evaluation, because feedback, the metaphor I like is a mirror. So that when you got in front of your mirror this morning, you got feedback. The mirror gave you nothing unless it was really unclean and distorted, which is part of the metaphor. If my mirror of you and how I mirror back is distorted and unclean, what comes back? It's going to be hard for you to see yourself in my eyes or in my presence. But if feedback is a mirror, then how a mirror works is that it's going to give, first of all, sensory-based information, empirical information. It's going to be empirical. You can see it, hear it, feel it, smell it, taste it. Feedback is sensory-based. If you can't see it, hear it, feel it, put it in the wheelbarrow, then it's not feedback. Call it feedback all you want, but it's not feedback. It's judgment, it's valuation, it's interpretations, whatever. Feedback tends to be very immediate, doesn't it? When you look in a mirror. So the immediacy of it. So what it is sensory-based information, sensory-based data, and it seems to be very immediate. What if you looked in the mirror and you didn't get your feedback for 5 minutes? Wouldn't that be a strange thing? You go in your mirror and you see if you're going to shave, and then, 5 minutes later, about time. Feedback tends to be in the moment, present, which is why, last week when you did that is really not feedback. And what feedback is for, if I have to wait that long to get that response, then it's hard to make adjustments, because feedback adjustments tends to be in the moment when it's really dynamic and effective. Feedback needs to be with rapport when it's with somebody else, with rapport. So when a person is a mirror to you, most of us will only accept that mirroring back if there is a sense of rapport, connection, respect, honor, a sense of trust, a sense that I can depend upon this. And so we give feedback with rapport. So if I just jump in and start giving you feedback, and it may be sensory-based, may be immediate, but the relationship hasn't earned it. It isn't at that point, then to some extent it fails the criteria of feedback. As I give feedback, because what I'm mirroring back is is how I'm experiencing you, then as we make it tentative, it seems to me how I'm experiencing you right now is your tone of voice is 2 decibels louder than mine, and it seems like you're yelling. So I give it tentative. Is that the way you experience it? And so if it's in the immediate, and I'm using sensory-based things that you can test it, see, hear, and feel, then it becomes effective in that way. Feedback is actionable. Actionable. It's like, I can do something about this. Because when I look in a mirror, and I look and I say, oh, I didn't catch that little spot there when I was shaving, so now I can do something about the information. If I give you information and you can't do anything about it, you know, I noticed that this and that about you, whatever it is, and it's like, well, so what? What should I do about it? What can I do about it? Then it's not actionable. And so that's very close also to relevant. It's relevant. So we make the feedback relevant and actionable.
Are you necessarily saying anything more than notice this? I mean, because what's sounding right, you know, you're saying, I think you should do this. I mean, you know.
Yeah, when I say I should, I think you should.
No, that's not.
Now that's not that's not feedback.
So if you're saying, I noticed that you're doing this, how do you follow that up without
What do you
saying,
think?
I want you to do this?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, think about the decibels. I guess you just followed it with this question, like, do you feel the same way, or can you see that, or?
I would encourage you to ask awareness questions. My awareness is that your voice is a couple decibels louder than mine. Are you aware of that? My sense is that you've interrupted me 4 times and I haven't finished my story. Are you aware of that? Do you need to say something? Do you want me to stop for a moment so you can say that? Because I'm trying to... So you're pointing out what's going on in the moment that's relevant to the relationship with rapport, actionable and relevant to the situation. I noticed that when you set that anchor on John just a moment ago, you instead of touching his skin so that you could get back to it, you touched his shirt, and when he moved his shirt, it was in a different place. It was probably 2 inches away from where you started. Are you aware of that? Because if I say you shouldn't do that, then that's judgment.
The other person also has to be aware that you're trying to get a cue or trying to tell them something. But sometimes you can say something like that and it just goes, because the other person's not...
So part of that conversation may be, you know, in light of you developing real skill at anchoring, I noticed that you anchored on the shirt, and when he moved his shirt, when you re-fired it, it was 2 inches away. Are you aware of that? In light of, and the relevancy of effective anchoring, you know, what do you think about touching the skin rather than the shirt, just having him roll up the sleeve? So we're sending information, actionable, relevant, to some subject with rapport that's tentative. This is how I see it. Am I missing something? Are you aware of this? Sensory-based and immediate. Then it becomes really information, relevant information, powerful information, dynamic information, information I can do something about, and that's what we call feedback. And in that sense, the ability to give that is a rare skill. It's a skill of mastery, and most people don't know how to do it. And so no wonder receiving feedback, because most of the time they're not giving me feedback. So if I'm going to get feedback, sometimes I have to help the giver to give me feedback. Because they start in and say, you know, you shouldn't do it this way. I might have to say, well, what did you see? To turn it into sensory-based. And how is this important for you? How's that relevant? So I might have to, in my receiving feedback, help the giver to give feedback rather than judgment.
You have a real problem if some people try and speak to them that way.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So some of us, this is what in coaching, we spend a lot of time in our meta coaching on this subject. We have several processes, and then every single day, every single exercise, we are benchmarking people in terms of giving and receiving feedback. But first of all, we have to know what feedback is. And so it's this piece of information that's relevant, that's sensory-based, that's tentative, that's with with rapport, that's actionable, that's relevant. And so the first question is, just for myself, how do I receive feedback? What do I think of feedback? What's my frames of feedback? So in terms of this diagram, if this is the person receiving the feedback, then what is the matrix that this person lives in? What's my matrix? What are the meanings that I give to someone offering me back that kind of information? Am I open to it? Am I receptive to it? Am I searching for it? Am I curious? Am I willing to explore it and to turn even evaluation, even judgment into feedback? Because there may be something useful. So how's your sense of self? Do you have a self? Who would you have to be to receive that kind of information? How open, how trusting, how vulnerable, how solid in your own self? What resources and powers? Well, it might be, I'm not responsible for anything that comes at me, but I'm willing to explore and see what's out there. What resources would you need to have? What do you need to think about other people? One of my beliefs is most people don't know how to give good feedback. And I'm not going to let them stop me from getting and sucking the best information from them. Just because they've got a problem and they tend to do judgment and use that weapon, I'm not going to let that put me off. Time becomes partly because there may have been a time in your past when someone gave you judgment and evaluation that was so hurtful, and they said, I'm just giving you feedback for your own good. And that past memory may now be coloring and affecting your matrix for feedback. And then, depending on what world you work in a world where you're totally incompetent and you don't know anything, most of us are pretty open for feedback because we hardly have any criteria to even understand what's going on. So we receive feedback pretty well. But when we get good in some world, a world that we move in, and we know some stuff, sometimes we just close ourselves off to feedback. So what worlds and to what extent are you open? So how do we receive feedback? So on page 70, that's giving. On page 69, receiving quality feedback. I love this quotation from D. Hawk. Mistakes are toothless little things, just the gum. This toothless little thing, if you recognize them and correct them. If you ignore and defend them, they grow fangs and bite.